Another very interesting session, right? So we have another I hope that this would be equally promising and a productive session for this uh, program, right? We have Professor Pradeep Kumar. Okay, Professor Pradeep Kumar Patra is Professor of English. Professor of English. Sorry, we are getting some. Okay, so Professor Patra is okay.
How to take that?
Okay, sir. Perhaps you can start getting some. Okay, sir. Professor Pradeep Kumar Patra is Professor of English and Rector of Bodo Land University, Assam. He holds a DLE degree as well. Besides being a prolific writer and having contributed more than 70 research articles in national and international journals and edited volumes, he is also a renowned poet and has published several volumes of poetry from Writers' Workshop and Sarup and Sons Publisher, New Delhi. He has also published 2 books of criticism, namely Indian Image in English Fiction and Moral Depravity in William Golding and Gabriel Gracia Marcuse from New Delhi. Also a collection of poems translated from Assamese to English, published from Guwahati. He has produced 18 PhDs. He is a winner of Michael Madhusudan Award for Literature for the year 2003. Sir is going to present his presentation is on thesis writing and planning, which is a very important aspect of research. So please, sir, please you present your presentation. Pradeep sir, please. Over to you. Perhaps your mic is.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
This is the last session of today. And I've been told to talk about the writing thesis or the vision of a thesis. How do you visualize a dissertation or thesis? And I'm sure that many of you are research scholars. Many of you would have completed PhD also. I don't have much more to speak on that, but definitely I'll give you certain vital informations, and in a way I'll try my best to refresh your memory maybe. So this is a continuous process. The vision of a thesis, this is a continuous process. It's not just one time. And am I audible?
Yeah, yes, sir. You're audible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is a continuous process, and this is very much integral to us. When we start a research, we just cannot say that this is just a research. This cannot be part of our. This cannot be part of
their mic. Okay,
so
thanks.
This is a process which is not just external, this is rather internal. That is first of all I want to say. So I'll just begin with W.B. Yeats, who says that in dream begins responsibility. When there is the question of responsibility and you are taking up the responsibility of research, specifically, naturally, I will say that responsibility is not just belonging to your practical life. It begins from your dream. So that is what it is, first of all. So what I want to indicate is that right from the beginning, that research just does not belong to one part of ourself. It entirely belongs to us. When we take up research, we deal with it with all our heart and soul. So naturally, as you know, when you talk about dissertation, so naturally, the first question that comes up, what is your contribution? Because we want to contribute certain things, that is why we take up research. Otherwise, what is the need of taking up research? We may be taking it for our own profession, that may be. But the most fundamental thing is that, so what will be our contribution? So that becomes a question that comes as a kind of problem. And we'll have to definitely contribute something very new and something very different. So that is what it is. And we'll have to justify our contribution also with proper documentation and all. So we have within our jurisdiction, there are certain things like time and resources. We have done a particular research, we have taken up a particular research that is time bound. So maybe after 5 years, that might not be that acceptable because it is a continuous process. And we have used the entire resources at one point of time. So things are here very much time bound. Not that we did research and that will be acceptable for all time to come. Whatever research you did, that might be the stepping stone for further research. But it does not mean that whatever is done, that is the final thing. That is not the grand finale or something of that sort. So we'll have to begin with the fact that research is something that is a kind of ongoing process. This is just like a moving river. The water that flows, that flows. Water does not simply stop because it's a question of time that is concerned. So it might be a tangible process, but at the same time, it may be an intangible process because we cannot touch certain things when we visualize. Even when we are doing our research, certain things come our dream also. It remains in our conscious, it remains in our subconscious in such a manner that even though we sleep, it remains with us. It's not that we are sitting at table, we are doing something and that is research. It's not that we go for field work, that is research. Once we leave the field, our mind is vacant. It's never like that. So it may be field visit, it may be test studies, or whatever it may be. It may be library or archive work, it may be data collection, it may be analysis, whatsoever it may be. So the process is that we do things, we start things, and we gradually move forward towards policing. We go on policing things. And ultimately, we move forward to defensible final version. There, the research ends. That is defensible final version. So there is a central research question. There are certain central research questions. So question is the main. Questions are based on certain issues or problems or whatever it may be. So first of all, as a researcher, we'll have to identify that well. So in this context, I want to say that we read certain books not in order to afford. Our purpose of reading book is not that we are able to afford this particular book or that particular book. Rather, their authors knew something. We are reading books because their authors knew something and we are incorporating that. Based upon that, we go ahead with our research. So that should be our purpose. So looking at the doctoral degree, how do we look at? We look upon it as a kind of contract. It's a contract between the author and the reader. Author in one hand and maybe reader on the other hand, maybe examiner on the other hand also. So the author is there, is putting up a particular question or maybe a set of questions. And naturally, the process proffers an answer to it. So there are research issues. So there are research issues based upon which there are questions. And there are examiners on the other hand, because ultimately the thesis is sent for examination. Naturally, if there are answers, naturally the questions are posed. So now the issue is that there are questions in one hand, there are answers on the other hand. So there must be a kind of compatibility of questions as well as answers. Naturally, when there is so what is happening in reality is that we put questions, no doubt. As researchers, they are putting questions based on issues. That part is all right. But when there are answers, when they go up to the answers, that means they are reaching the end, they are not that committed. So that is what is largely happening. And we are having a massive set of materials, and those are undirected. So that is the kind of research usually we are going towards. So the problem is that the question is asked and answer provided, and those may not be connected. So in reality, that is what is taking place. And there must be proper correspondence between the two. The author may be doing X and the reader is doing Y. If things are problematized, this is all right. But if there is having no proper correspondence, that is a problem. They are not compatible with each other. So the correspondence, largely we find that these are very hazy. Question may be specific and answer given may be too vague. So that is the kind of thing that is happening. So, or sometimes it so happens that part of the question is answered properly, or part of the question is not addressed at all. So that is why it contributes to the entire problem. So there is a thesis contract, and that is demanding, and there is a constraining in that for the students and for those who are assessing their works. So those who are assessing their works, so it's not that they can change the questions. The examiners cannot change the questions at all. The examiners are only to see that answers are appropriate or not. There is a dissertation. The examiner cannot question the questions, whatever the candidate has put forth, but not allowed to invent their own questions. Examiner cannot do that. The assessors have to take the candidate's questions as the basis for assessment. So that is the process, and that is the ideal process through which it passes through. So here, I would like to say that the PhD authors should establish a very clear question, whether for the whole thesis or for each of its component papers. That actually it should be. And the question should be a serious one. The question should be a serious one, and that should relate to existing literature and debates. And we talk about review of literature. The question should be very clearly and logically based on the review of literature. In that, there is the past and the present. What is the work that has been done in the past, and what is the works that have been done at present time. So those are the things that we are concerned with. So we write dissertation in MA level also. We say students to write dissertation in MA level also in many of the universities. So when they are writing dissertations, and they might be answering certain things. They might be having a question and they might be answering those. Now, those might be satisfying external agenda. So depth-wise, I mean, that might be less. But when we look upon a PhD thesis, it's a large process that is involved, because there are question of resources and there are big issues in a PhD process. So in magnitude, what I am telling is that in magnitude, PhD thesis is, in both in depth and magnitude, a PhD thesis is much larger than the MA thesis. So there are resources and there are resources to be tackled, and there are big issues. And among those big issues, there are large budgets. There are large budgets, sophisticated research technologies, which are at their disposal, and large cooperative research teams also, or squad of people, and so many other things involved in that, which usually you do not find that much in MA thesis. So naturally, you have the impression that those are the things which are completely unmanageable. So there is a question. So naturally, there are dangers associated with that also. And you are thinking at this level about a whole leadership as well. You are writing a thesis. You are not just writing for yourself. You do personalize that, but you are thinking about the whole entire readership, because there are reactions of a few examiners as well among those readers. So when you are choosing a topic is chosen not to illuminate a worthwhile field of study, but just to provide a high certainty route to an academic ticket. The point that I want to raise is that the kind of topic that you are raising, the kind of topic that you are going for, that must have certain certainties. So as a scholar, you should have such kind of foresight, and you should have discussion with your guide, and your investigation at the initial stage may not show so many things, but you should have enough knowledge that this is leading to certain certainties. So that kind of thinking a scholar should have, and that kind of thinking could be guided by the guide. So we'll focus on the research question. So the point is, if it is, first of all, if it is worth continuing, because we are taking up a particular topic and in that we have a set of one question or a set of questions. So whether it is worth continuing or not. Or another thing is that if you are not interested, you are not genuinely interested in your thesis question, that is also one matter. And you are not committed to finding an answer to it also, that might be another issue. So then it will be all the harder for you. So if those are the things, and if those are the negative things, those are there in your mind, so naturally it will hamper your entire process of research. So the question here is that, so the point here that I want to make is that if you are not having a proper question, you are not having an answer. Sometimes we say that we don't have a proper answer. It's not that we don't have proper answer. It is the fact that we do not put a proper question. So that is it. So the point that is here to be underlined is that we'll have to take a proper topic. We'll have to be interested in issues. We'll have to be interested properly in the questions. Then we can move forward towards the answers. If we are not having that, we cannot. We are unlikely to maximize our career prospect, because it is a question of our career. We are making a career out of it. So if that is the thing that is happening, that is the kind of experience, and the kind of experience which we are having, that is very much external, and the kind of research we are having, through that we are not able to reach the core of the whole thing, then that is not the ideal research. So what is required here is a personal commitment. We'll have to have personal commitment and interest, which really count. At the same time, the views of others also definitely count. So naturally, there are certain experience you may have as researchers. So it is very necessary to point out when I am talking about this. Sometimes it so happens that you are in a department as a research scholar. So what happens, you have your guide and other guides as well. Sometimes visiting professors are coming. So when you are introduced by your guide or faculty to the visiting professor, so naturally the professor coming from other university will ask about your research topic, area, etc., whatever it may be. So if at all you are, this is one point, that it's not necessary that you are able to say everything in a good way to the visiting professors. But on the other hand, if you are looking at from another angle, if at all you are not able to point out the whole thing within 2 to 3 minutes to the visiting professor, so naturally it is high time for you to evaluate yourself. There is something lacking in your project. There is something lacking in your effort. If at all you are not able to convince the professor within 2 minutes, so you know what you are doing. So that's time for introspection, and it is a worthwhile thing, definitely. And your personality is reflected. You are reflected in that. You are into research. I said at the beginning that it is not something external. You are completely steeped in that, and with research, your personality is reflecting the kind of research you are doing. So that is why you just cannot take research just like a garment. Today you are wearing and tomorrow you are changing. You have to completely internalize it. And if you are internalizing it, you are enjoying it. So that is why I said you set the proper questions based on issues, go for proper review of literature based on present and past. You build up the context and proceed. So you'll have to capture the essence of the sophisticated and specialized topic. That is what you'll have to do. So if you cannot give a synoptic presentation to the professor who has come, so naturally you are a failure, you can say, and you have scope for rethinking, and you will have to reevaluate yourself, what is lacking in you. So you should be able to, you should grasp things in such a manner that within a few minutes you can give a full synoptic view of the things. So if you are able to do that, your chances are very high that you are doing well. So those are the symptoms. You do not yet understand your thesis topic. If at all you are failing, that means whatever topic is given, maybe the topic is given by your guide, you are not fully understanding it. So that's why you are not able to formulate your question, and you are not able to move gradually from question to answer. So naturally, you may not, at initial stage, you may not be able to answer the question, but definitely as a research scholar, you can define the question. So that you can do, and you can deliver the answer gradually in course of time. So that way you can move towards a kind of effective PhD thesis, and that is genuinely personalized. So that means you are writing a thesis means a thesis which is personalized. Otherwise, it is not a contribution. So usually what happens, people put a review of literature, they simply go on extending and conclude. And that's not a contribution. So when there is a question of contribution, you will have to wholly personalize the thing. So there is a question, and that should be, there must be a question, and that should be reasonably distinctive. The question must be very distinctive, and the question should be always from a personally chosen angle. If that is not there, naturally you cannot enjoy the whole thing. It may be mildly idiosyncratic, that is different, but it should be from a chosen angle, and that angle should be completely your own, and that is likely to be adopted by other researchers during the course of their studies. So this is how you gradually move towards the frame of a thesis, and you have, when you are going towards the frame of the thesis, you have intellectual problem. You have, within that frame, you have intellectual problem, you have paradox, but definitely you will have to take care that you do not have a gap within that frame. So that is the negative character of the thesis. And there should be proper explanation for everything. You may have problem, you may have paradox, but definitely not a gap, and everything should be explained properly, and there should be interesting and effective answers. That is what is expected. So now the question is, what is intellectual problem? We discuss about thesis and we say that is intellectual problem. What is that intellectual problem? So intellectual problem, that has 5 components. And the first is the goal or objective. You should have very strong objective of your own, very clear and strong objective of your own. So that is the first component of intellectual problem. The second one is an initial state of your dissertation writing. The starting situation and the resources available. So these are the things which are coming within that. And existing literature, that is to be discussed, as I said sometime before. And resources from the third component. Third component are the resources. And resources means new data. The constraints are the fourth element. The fourth element are the constraints. The final element is the outcome. So this is what we call the intellectual problem in short. And this is the intellectual problem around which the thesis definitely revolves. So the issue of problematizing, because in a thesis, the issue of problematizing is very much central. So it is not that they cannot see the solution. So what happens usually in practice, what happens? It is not that the scholars cannot see the solution, but it is that they cannot see the problem. So this is how usually happens in Indian context. So there are PhD students and they have their empiricist approaches, definitely, and problematizing their thesis, a topic that is very difficult and odd also. And if at all you are interested in unproblematizing the whole thing right from the beginning, I'm telling, you take a problem and right from the beginning, you take a problem, you try to settle things and move towards conclusion. That is the usual practice. That is why this is a dissertation. That is why you consider it to be a kind of contribution in the field of research. Just imagine things are not problematized. Things are not problematized means things are already existing. You have nothing more to do, you have nothing more to contribute also. That means that provides no worthwhile intellectual focus. That does not provide any intellectual focus or anything of that sort. That does not provide any intellectual focus, that does not provide any protection, or that does not provide any stage of examination also. That's not worth examining also. That is already there. So there will be many questions. So naturally, ultimately, if things are unproblematized right from the beginning, so the question naturally arises. Naturally, the examiner will ask, what is this thesis for? Naturally, examiner will write in the report, what is this thesis for? So naturally, so a scholar right from the beginning cannot answer the question, but definitely he can define the questions, and gradually you go over to deliver the answer, and there is equal scope for to intervene on both parts. The scope for intervening both parts, question and answer. Questions are to be defined, and as a scholar, gradually you are moving towards answer. So what you will be able to say or hope to be able to say. So that is the focus. What you will be able to say or hope to be able to say. That exactly is the focus. And there are also certain practicalities of research. So naturally, in research, there is a high level of determinacy. That means we try to fix things. We try to fix things right from the beginning. So that is the wrong process. And we do not try to keep it open-ended. If you are keeping it open-ended, you have the scope for linking it to so many other factors. You have the scope for linking it to so many other issues as well. So naturally, we try, each time we fail, it does not mean that it should stop. Research should stop because we fail. With failure, we should go ahead and we should have our successive attempts. So research, if at all you try to explain it in the form of an image, it is just like a rugged stone, a block of stone. A sculpture is there. The sculpture is giving a life to the stone, not just in one day, gradually in slow process. He's working very hard on it. So the stone is very crude initially. Just imagine how it becomes a beautiful statue. So that is what research is. As a researcher, you get a stone in your hand and you give a proper shape to it in course of time. And that is what actually the researcher's responsibility is. So naturally, in this process, what we intend is that we go for original work. So while doing original work, so what we experience is that what we see is that all good things which exist are the fruit of originality. This is what John Stuart Mill said. All good things which exist are the fruits of originality. Anything that is permanent, anything that is original, that is the result of the fruits of originality. And while doing so, we never think alone. In the research, actually, we think that we are doing research, I am alone or we as a team alone. It's not that. Look at the review of literature. So who are the people involved in that? It's not just one person. Review of literature concerning past and present. So many writers are involved, and based upon that, you develop. You shape your questions and gradually move towards conclusion and contribution, whatever it may be. So, if you're looking things from that angle, we see that we are not just alone in research. We think in company. In research, we think in company. In literature, we do research and we take into consideration the reviews, comments of critics, etc. In social science, also like that. So we do things in vast collaboration. There is a collaboration, and that's a vast collaboration. And there are workers, there are researchers, there are critics, there are evaluators. So all are participating. There is past as well as present. So there is a whole intellectual world. There is no definite boundary of the research. There is a whole intellectual world. You are talking about Indian context. Maybe you are talking about a local context or regional context. But you build up the context with reference to so many things, so many critics, so many authors. So you find each one very important, and there is, in that process, there is a kind of initiation, there is a help. You are getting help from other personalities as well, and there is the process. In that, there is verification, there is a network of information, and there is what we call encouragement. So that is what research is. Research is never singular. So yes, you are contributing ultimately, but your contribution does not come alone. It comes against the background of something. So when you are authoring, you are thinking, and you are thinking together with others. So that is the kind of thing. So when you are going to computer screen, before going to computer screen, naturally, you go for your pen and paper. Whatever you think, you just put down. So later on, you enter in computer. So my point is that you do think, and that really matters. And it is the thinking that really matters, and that really contributes. So there may be conflicting ideas when you are thinking. There may be conflicting ideas, and there may be what we call a play of conflicting ideas as well. So those are what fit our needs, and we take care of that particular moment. So in research, time also matters. As I said before, and that moment also matters. So ultimately, we move towards writing things, and we do write things in a systematic way. And making this commitment is psychologically very difficult. We may be knowing things, but writing something, to write something, we prepare ourselves psychologically. All the time we think that, is it enough that we should write now? So that is the question that comes up most of the time. Whatever we know, is that enough that we can write now? So what happens is that we just go on postponing that moment of writing. We start postponing that. So it so happens that there are big writers, they also go on postponing the writing such, because it is there in our psychology that prohibits us. We immediately do not go forward. We may be talking, I may be talking so many things. That's a different thing, but writing is altogether a different thing. It should be very systematic, and we'll have to take care that we put everything. It's also dissertation. It may be a research paper, it may be dissertation. So this is what this process of writing, when it comes up through certain blockage, and that blockage is primarily psychological, and it hampers even the experienced authors. So when there is the question of originality of the thesis, there are certain European universities that have different concepts that varies from university to university. When there is the question of originality, I'll just look at some of the things, like how the University of London fixes it. I'll just give you one example. So how they take up the process and how they fix originality. I don't have much time to speak about all this, but I will say that University of London, so it tells the examiners certain things all about originality. It gives certain guidelines that a doctoral thesis can show originality in two definite ways. That is the exercise of independent critical power or both. Then new facts, and which then the dissertation should be concerned with the new facts, and those should be the result of empirical researches. That is how University of London fixes originality and accordingly gives guidelines to the examiners. So there are little analyzed documents, unreported, unpublished part of case study and all. So the point is that when we are going for research, all these unexplored things don't matter. There must be running survey, independent critical power. You have independent critical power when you move towards things which are unexplored. Because University of London is speaking about independent critical power. That has to be judged. That has to be evaluated by the examiner. So there is a distinctive angle of perspective of his or her own. The examiner is to judge that the dissertation has a distinctive angle or perspective of his or her own. That has to be evaluated. So this is the kind of standard the University of London is setting while sending thesis to examiners. So it is independence very important. So the question that arises that when there is a researcher, the researcher must be very much independent. When you are independent, naturally you can write a good thesis. You should have free thinking. But practically, we'll have to see whether it is possible or not. It depends upon countries, first of all, the context of a particular country, the kind of role that you are having in a country. That really matters. Then the kind of department or university where the scholar is working, that also matters. So when there is a question of independence, because it is from the independence that independent critical power does come up. So that is why the question of independence is coming up. First of all, the country in which you are working as a researcher, then the university where you are working, then the guide under whom you are working, because you have to take care of your guide. You can be independent, but at the same time, you cannot be independent. You cannot displease your guide. So that is why sometimes we see that the scholars are changing guides. So this is also one of the facts. So naturally what happens is that otherwise it will be disconcerting. If you are not matching well with your guide, you are having independent thinking power, but it is disconcerting. Ultimately, it will lead to nothing. You are not able to submit your thesis. So that is the problem. So this independent work criterion is very important. But practically, in reality, what is happening, that's the different thing. And definitely we cannot change. But we will have to be just aware this is what is happening. So, framing your own view. So that's in that context I am talking about framing your own view. That is very important. And that should be the part of very strong academic tradition. So it takes time to develop. First of all, it takes time to develop because you have to negotiate so many things when you are moving towards it. Initially, maybe you are severing as a scholar, but gradually you start negotiating and you learn how to do that. You try to structure your opening chapter or chapters exclusively or extensively around summaries of a succession of previous works and articles. So that is how you start organizing. And all these things are based upon your thinking and tradition of thinking. So here, what I want to say is that if you speak of nothing but what you have read, no one will read you. If you speak of nothing but what you have read, no one will read you, because what is missing in that is your thinking. If you have read a lot of things and you are just presenting those, it's not a matter. But what you ought to do is that you'll have to add your thinking. That is why it is also necessary that do not read, think. You read, it is all right. Reading is required for thinking. But sometimes we'll have to be such that we'll have to think that even though we have had a lot of reading, we'll have to for some time think that we have not done any reading. We'll have to forget our preconceived ideas and notion, and we'll have to start thinking. So that is what is required. The students are naturally, PhD students are doing big book thesis, and they are dealing with the research literature questions, and they are writing long literature reviews, and they are to get you any closer to finding their own what you call distinctive question, because that is what research warrants. Sometimes there is the inability of the scholars to personalize the thesis topic. So that is largely happening. So trying to answer someone else's question is not good. You'll have to first of all have your own issue, have your question. But if at all you are copying somebody else's question and trying to answer, so naturally you are not able to personalize the whole thing. So, or sometimes it so happens that is usually the trend. We are not able to go for your own question. We are not able to going for answer is a far cry. We are going for what we call overextended literature review. So when you are going for overextended literature review, that is an indication that we are not able to go for a question. By having literature review, we are setting the background and we are trying to contextualize the whole thing, contextualize the whole issues and question. But literature review is not the final thing. That is what I mean. So reading students to postpone doing any creative work of their own. So that is problematic. And that is a hazard for the PhD scholars. So there are certain illusions regarding review of literature. So the illusions are that the world does not contain any information. It is as it is. Information about it is created in the organism that is a human being through its interaction with the world. To speak about the storage of information, that is to fall into the semantic trap. So you are falling into the information means you are falling into a semantic traps relating to meaning. Books or computers are part of the world. They can yield information when they are looked upon. We move the problem of learning and cognition nicely into the blind spot of our intellectual vision. If you confuse vehicles for potential information with information itself. Sometimes while doing research, we confuse the vehicles for potential information. Our potential information lies somewhere, but we take up the medium as the potential information. So that is the fate of the research that we find in a country like India. So we are sometimes confused. We don't have a clear vision. So you must have our defense. In a research, we should document things properly. We should document things in such a manner that we can have a defense of ourselves. As a scholar, you can have your own defense. So when the viva is taking place, you can defend yourself with all documentation so that you are not trampled. You should not be trampled by other people's ongoing research. You should have a distinctive and personalized framing. very distinct and personalized framing. Personalized framing means personalized framing of the entire dissertation of your thesis question and approach. That is not in having a deserted niche or a gap topic all to yourself. In that, there should not be any gap between the questions, and that has to be taken care. Sometimes we commit mistake by overdoing things. We have promises of theoretical or empirical breakthrough, but they do not materialize. That means we are asking the questions, but we are setting the questions right, but we are failing to answer all this. So that is the problem usually taking place. Excuse me. So we are posing some questions, but we are not answering those. That is happening. And we have quickest and surest way to boost readers' resistance, that to set our views, and we have ideas somehow originated and re-originated with you alone. So one foundation while doing research, that is to recognize that any new work rests on an accumulation of previous and present literature. I'm talking about review of literature in that. So the point is that here I want to say is that suppose there are two authors, that is the difference between X and Y. So it is the Y, that means you as a research scholar who is adding to the review of literature. That is what you consider as value added. So when you are contributing, it does not mean that you are contributing the whole lot of things. Your contribution is based upon certain thing. Your contribution is based upon the past as well as present materials. So when you are contributing by having personalized the whole thing, so that is what you say as value added. That means you as a scholar, you have transformed certain things. Before your coming as a scholar, something was something, and you transformed that. And on the other hand, you also enhanced that. So that is the relational pattern of argument. That is the relational pattern of argument. Relational pattern of argument in the sense that something is there. On that basis, you build up your argument. On that basis, you do contribute. So that is how it is happening. So this is a relational pattern of argument in that you are transforming as a scholar, and at the same time, you are enhancing because of your power of thinking. You seem on top, or rather than overtly dependent on previous work. So here you are, as a scholar, you are contributing, so you are on the top. Not just overly dependent on previous work. You are not overtly dependent on previous work. Previous work is there, but here your contribution lies. The focus is that. So naturally, you are going for a new theory, unitary and all embracing, and that is immediate element of novelty or paradox, framework of faster, unanalyzed and unarticulated reserves of knowledge, experience, faith, and presuppositions. So within the frame, what you have knowledge, you have experience. These are the things you are putting together. Knowledge, experience, faith, and presuppositions. So there is the maintenance of continual academic debates. So it is a continual, I said in the beginning also, it's a continuous process and continual academic debate. And it's not that when you are awake, you are doing. It so happens that when you are obsessed in research, it goes into your dream also. It's not that you are sleeping, you have left your research. It's never like that. You are sleeping, so you have left your teaching. It's never like that. Sometimes it so happens that we plan things in dream also. We plan things in sleep also. So that is the practice, because we are so much engrossed in that. It's a kind of maintenance of continual academic debate, and we think through, and we are thinking through. Our thinking is not just one time, or our thinking is not just a kind of process which stops at one point of time. So we are building up intellectual viewpoints, and we are moving towards a change. So research means we are moving towards a change. It can never be static. So you are bringing certain change over 3 or 4 years of time. And ultimately you are reaching, where are you reaching? Where your interests lie, and can relate your question effectively to research literature. So it is the thinking which is at the center, and your thinking is the power, and your thinking should be based on freedom. So Bertrand Russell said, most people would die sooner than think. In fact, they do so. Few people think more than 2 or 3 times a year. So what I want to say is that it is thinking that is important, and frequent thinking is always welcome. Few people think more than 2 or 3 times a year. I have made an international reputation, G.B. Shaw said. I have made international reputation for myself by thinking once or twice a week. So this is the dynamism of thinking. So this kind of dynamism of thinking is required in case of researchers. So that is what I'm telling. Then in present day research, it is thinking which is very difficult, and we hardly find any original thinking in research. It's really very difficult, and thinking is like building your muscle. If you have a body, you are building your muscle, and when you are building your muscle, so naturally sometimes you get wounded, strained, etc. But ultimately you have your six-pack or whatever it may be, and you have a kind of pleasure. So this is relating to body, a kind of exercise. So thinking is a kind of exercise for your mind. So more you think, greater is your sharpness. So vigorous exercise is required for your body. So vigorous exercise also is required for your mind. And with your thinking, you can internalize new ideas. If you are not a thinking person, you cannot internalize new ideas. There is nothing so easy as what was discovered yesterday, nor so difficult as what will be discovered tomorrow. So on thinking, I say, in G.B. Shaw said, you have learned something that always feels at first as if you had lost something. You have learned something, that means you have graduated to another level of thinking. That means you have lost something, another set of thinking you have lost. Eddie Izzard says, I am not afraid of failure. If you are learning anything new, you have got to get through humiliation. If you are learning, you are not confined to humiliation. You are not obsessed with any humiliation. If you are learning, you simply bypass it, because you are learning. You are not in one state of mind. You are in one state of mind means you are just in a pond. You are overcoming that state of humiliation. That means you are in a stream. That is a moving water. So thinking is like that. Thinking is like a moving water. Andrew Gide says, one does not set out in search of new hands without being willing to be alone on an empty sea. So if at all you are alone, that kind of powerful thinking does come. So So this is what I want to say, that it is thinking which is paramount in research, and every research should be based upon such kind of thinking. You should have proper research question based upon issues, and you should build up your context in the form of a review of literature, and gradually you should move towards what we call answers, and that is what actually the examiners expect. So this is what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pradeep Kumar Patra Sahab. You beautifully discussed different aspects of research, that is thesis writing and planning. You rightly said research is a continuous process. It's an ongoing process. In fact, one must personalize, internalize, in fact, research. One should have personal commitment, and research demands determination, or one cannot displease one's guide. So, in fact, it took us to our days when we were involved in research in MPhil and PhD. So, thanks for this beautiful presentation. Now, the session is open for questioning, and I hope participants would definitely make this session fruitful by their questions. Please.
Sir,
Okay, sir, you can ask your question.
sir, is there any minimum and maximum page limit for a PhD thesis in social sciences?
Any?
Any maximum or minimum page limit for PhD in social sciences like education, political science, and so on?
Mhm.
Page
No, I
limit.
do not think that. I do not think that there is minimum or maximum. But
What should be the ideal page? What should be
no,
the
if you are looking at things from practical point of view, you'll have to write things, you know. So that is why I do not think that below 160 or 170
yes,
you
sir.
can write anything. I do not think that below that page, 100, below even 200 pages, we can sum up the whole thing. I don't think so. If
Some
at
of
all
the
you are
people,
very good, if at all you are very good in writing, definitely you will take 170 pages minimum. That is minimum.
some universities ask for more than 250 pages.
That is ideal because they will have things to write definitely.
But in all cases, there cannot be a limit of 250 or more pages. It can be, research can be completed in 150, 160 pages. Is
No,
there any guideline from UGC?
and no such guideline, no such guideline.
Okay.
So thanks, Sharma sir, for asking this question. So Muhammad Oyub has raised his hand. Please, if he has to ask some question. Muhammad Oyub. So we have Muhammad Oyub. He has raised his hand. If he has to say, ask, he can. Oh. P. Sharma sir has been very active from last many sessions. He has been asking
Sir,
questions. He's thankful to
sir,
him. He's making this session very fruitful,
thank
especially
you,
this
sir.
interaction.
I am a retired person, and my
Okay,
habit
sir.
is learning.
Okay.
Sir,
Okay,
you are not, you are, sir, very much active. You very much involved in.
Yes,
Should be.
yes.
I should
Should be.
be. It is an occasion. May not come again.
Sure, sir. Your presence is a matter of encouragement for we people, especially for younger generation. So thanks for participating and showing interest in such programs.
Yes, sir.
It gives us inspiration.
Learnings goes with life.
Sure, sir.
No limit.
So we have Imtiaz Wani. He has raised hand. If he has, yes.
Not audible.
Please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pradeep, Dr. Pradeep Patra, sir. I just want to congratulate you for especially raising two important points here regarding the research. That is, first of all, you discussed about that a research scholar must have a valid data with him in order to defend himself during his viva or once he is publishing some work.
Yeah.
The second thing you have nicely raised, that is, we sometimes instead of having our own problem, we just publish the work in the form of review articles. That is basically others' problem. So instead of this, sometimes if we have our own question, our own problem, and then present that in the form of articles, communications, that is much better if we consider our own problems rather than focusing on publishing the reviews, which is basically contributed by other groups. Thank you so much, sir, for raising these things here.
Thank you very much, sir.